I'll tell you exactly where it went wrong. Not the day my husband died. People expect sorrow to rearrange your furniture and move in. No, it started on a Saturday morning at St. Mark's in the church basement with the brown linoleum and the long tables that always wobble, where the coffee tastes like it's been faithful to the same metal urn since Reagan. My son slid a stack of papers toward me between the tuna casserole and the red Jell-O. It's just a consent to list, Mom, he said, like I was ordering a pizza. Greg already has buyers circling. Quick timeline. We'll make this easy. He said we allot that month. We'll list. We'll handle. We'll move you closer to Vanessa. We'll figure out your meds. We. Funny how we never meant him and his sister lifting a real box. I didn't touch the papers. I was still holding a styrofoam cup with my name scrawled in Sharpie. Someone had drawn a heart inside the R. The church ladies do that when they're worried about you. I set the cup down and read the first line, authorization to sell Coleman's Hardware, 14 East River Street, and the second line, seller Rachel Coleman, and then the third, a blank line where my signature was supposed to go waiting like a trap. They can put a yoga studio in where the plumbing aisle is. Vanessa chirped from across the table. She wore sunglasses indoors. She said it was because of migraines. I've known her since she was born. It was because her eyes tell the truth before her mouth does. And maybe a smoothie bar. God, this town needs a smoothie bar. The fellowship hall went quiet the way rooms do when people are trying so hard not to stare that they stare harder. Somebody's fork clinked. The coffee urn hissed. Pastor Jim coughed into his fist and pretended to wipe a non-existent stain off a folding chair. I looked at my son. The store isn't for sale. He smiled with all his teeth the way men smile when they're selling you something and also when they're lying. Mom, be reasonable. You're 61. The shop's too much. You can't keep hauling bags of concrete and dealing with ladders and whatever. You should be enjoying life. We've got it all lined up. I don't know what enjoying life looks like to a man who's never had to keep the lights on with a jar of rolled quarters. But for me, it looks like the front bell of a hardware store dinging because Mr. Alvarez needs more furnace filters and Miss Carroll wants to know why the birdseed went up 50 cents and 14 different teenagers always on a Saturday need key copies made for the first car their parents wish they hadn't bought. Enjoying life looks like a pegboard, you understand. I slid the papers back across the table. I said no. Vanessa let out a loose, theatrical laugh. You don't have to be stubborn to prove a point. Noah's just trying to help. Don't make this harder than it needs to be. If you ever want to see what loneliness looks like, say no in a room where everyone expects yes. It looks like your daughter wearing sunglasses to a church basement. It looks like your son's jaw tightening at the word consent. It looks like the women who held you when you cried a month ago suddenly finding great interest in the dessert table. Pastor Jim cleared his throat. Rachel, we can, talk through options if you'd like. There's a grief group on Tuesdays and a senior housing tour out by the interstate. They have an activity room. An activity room, Vanessa said, nodding as if she'd been there and personally approved the bingo set. I almost told them all to go to hell, truly. But the thing is, I was raised to keep my voice level. Mama said people listen differently when you whisper. So I whispered, you set this up without me. Noah's smile finally dropped. It's not like that. It is exactly like that, I said. You had a meeting, you made a plan, you brought me a pen and a deadline. He leaned in close, softening his tone the way he does when he's trying to coax a discount out of someone. Dad would want you taken care of. There it was. The sentence people use when they want your obedience wrapped up to look like love. I looked past his shoulder to the bulletin board by the kitchen. There was last month's flyer for the Chamber of Commerce breakfast my husband's handwriting circled, where it said, guest speaker, young entrepreneurs. He'd written a note beside it in pencil the way he always did. Ask about small business grants for backroom remodel. He never got around to asking. The pencil ghosts people leave behind can gut you in a public place if you're not careful. I picked up my styrofoam cup and took the smallest sip of that faithful church coffee. And I thought about the bottom drawer of my husband's desk. The one that sticks unless you know to lift it first because the track's bent. From that time, he tripped over a box of sink traps and caught himself on the handle. There's a sealed letter in that drawer. It's been staring at me for 30 days, like a dog who knows the schedule better than you do. Open after 30 days, he wrote on the front in his square, careful print. I've been avoiding the calendar like it could read my mind. Mom, Noah said, we need a timeline. Here is something I need you to understand. Grief will roll right over you, but insult will plant your feet. I wasn't ready to open the letter. I was ready to not sign my life away between casserole and Jell-O. No, I said again. And then I stood up and left before my mouth could make bigger promises than the rest of me could keep. The bell at Coleman's Hardware sounds different first thing in the morning. Not cheery yet, just honest. I unlocked the door at 6:40 a.m. on Monday and stood in the quiet a minute, breathing in cardboard and oil and sawdust, and that lemon cleaner we dilute too much because I like it better when it fades fast. Maya came in at 7:15, clutching a to-go cup and a blueberry muffin like armor. She's 23 tattoos peeking out from under her cardigan, the kind of steady you pray your own kids will grow into. Her grandma raised her. Maybe that's why she looks me in the eye when she asks a question. You okay? She asked, meaning. Why did I see your son and his wife measuring the front windows with that slick-haired real estate cousin of his yesterday after service? Define, okay, I said. She smiled, set the muffin on the counter, and started turning the pegboard hooks so the packages hang right. Got it. Code for not today, Maya. Noted. Want me to run the delivery in the back? We're low on deck screws. Please, I said, grateful for work. Work has hands you can hold. By 9:30, the bell had found its good mood. Mr. Alvarez asked for his filters. Miss Carroll complained about birdseed prices and then bought 2 bags anyway, muttering something about Blue Jays having unionized. A kid I didn't recognize from the high school held a mailbox and said, Do y'all have the thing that, makes this not sad? I sold him a can of red Rust-Oleum and a little pride. At 10 on the dot, the front door opened, and in walked Noah in his, business jacket, followed by Greg Talbot with his shiny shoes and a hairline that has given up but refuses to admit it. Vanessa trailed them both sunglasses off today, eyes bright like cameras might be around. Greg stuck his hand out like a state flag. Rachel, always a pleasure. We just happen to be in the neighborhood. No, you don't, I said, because some days politeness is consent, and I was fresh out. He laughed a little. He laughs like a man who's prepaid his sins. We thought we'd take some measurements. Just preliminary. You know, to get the listing language right. Historic storefront with unlimited potential. It already has one, I said. Potential. It just looks like bolts. Vanessa drifted toward the paint samples. She always loved paint samples. She used to run her little fingers over the chips when she was 5 and announce new colors, Princess Couch and Sky After Cookies. There are moments in your life where the floor beneath you is made of memory. It's hard to stand up straight on a floor like that. Noah came behind the counter like he still worked Saturdays in high school. Mom, let's go in the back. Talk privately. We can talk right here. My voice didn't rise. I didn't need it to. Greg tried cheering up the room. We're excited condos above, retail below. Vibrant and modern. This town's changing. Gotta keep up. Miss Carroll, who had been rummaging through the bin of odd nails like a prospector, didn't look up. Town's not a teenager, she said. Doesn't have to keep up with anything. Maya appeared from the stockroom with a box cutter and quiet shoulders. She stood just behind me. Not a big gesture. But I felt it. When you are being cornered, the smallest human near your shoulder can feel like a wall. Noah lowered his voice. If you'd just sign. We're not signing anything today, Maya said, sharp as a snap. I turned. She slid the accounts ledger onto the counter like a card in a game. Her finger tapped a line. Authorized signatories Rachel Coleman. She looked at Greg. And just Rachel Coleman. City business license says the same. Noah blinked. Maya, this is family business. She held his stare. This is a business. It's a small thing, I know. A young woman with a box cutter and a spine. But sometimes the whole weight of a day shifts 2 inches because one person refuses to pretend they don't see what they see. Greg cleared his throat and tried again. No problem. We can come back. Timeline is flexible. But we do have interested parties. And Rachel, just so you're not caught off guard, the chamber breakfast on Thursday will be presenting the proposed downtown redevelopment. Your address is key to the anchor concept. He smiled in a way that made me want to wash my hands. So that's how I found out they planned to announce the sale of my store at the chamber breakfast. Before I had agreed to anything. Before they'd zipped me into the respectable costume called Mom Said Yes. When they left, the bell dinged and the door swung shut, and for a second, I couldn't hear anything but the hum of the old fluorescent lights. I pressed my palm flat on the counter to find the room again. You want me there? Maya asked, pretending to restock tape measures. At the breakfast, I asked. She shrugged. I like eggs. Also, I don't like men with shiny shoes telling women what their lives are worth. You'll get in trouble at your day job, I said. She smiled. I am at my day job, and you're my boss. I nodded. Okay, can be a prayer when you say it right. That night, I went home to a house that still smelled like sun-warmed wood when the heat kicked on. I reheated soup I didn't taste and stood at the sink staring at the backyard where the maple drops those big helicopter seeds that used to make Lily squeal. She's 5 states away now freshman year, learning to make choices in a city that doesn't care if she chooses wrong. I went to the back bedroom that used to be Noah's and then Lily's when she was small and afraid of thunderstorms. I opened the old metal desk that used to be my husband's and then mine because that's how marriage works. Everything you think is his or yours becomes ours or nobody's or both. The bottom drawer stuck. It only opens if you lift first. I lifted. It sighed open. The letter was where I knew it would be because I put it there, because he told me to, because he couldn't stop taking care of me just because his heart stopped doing its job. Open after 30 days, the front said in pencil. It had been 32. I didn't open it. Not because I was afraid of bad news. Smart women fear good news more. Good news means you can't pretend anymore. I slid it back under the hanging files and closed the drawer. It stuck, like always. I put my forehead on the cool metal and stayed there until the dog, 2 houses over, barked at the train, and the train answered back like it knew him. Before I went to bed, I dug a shoebox out of the hall closet. I packed it with stupid things: Noah's second-place ribbon from the County Fair Pinewood Derby, Vanessa's first-grade handwriting book with the backward S's, the crooked ceramic fish Lily made me in kindergarten that looks like a boot with gills. I wrote Noah's address on the lid. I wrote Vanessa's on another box. I stacked them by the door. Sometimes you don't need a plan. You need a pile. On Thursday, I wore my husband's denim jacket to the chamber breakfast because it still smells like him when the room gets warm. The diner was full. Business cards fanned out like playing hands. Greg Talbot stood near the front shaking hands like he was running for mayor of a town that didn't elect him. A banner over the pancake station said, "Downtown the Future." Miss Carroll waved me over to a booth. Pastor Jim nodded, eyes soft. He looked like a man taking attendance in a lifeboat. Good to see you, Rachel. You too, Pastor. Noah slid in beside me, all smiles. Vanessa across sunglasses perched like they might fly off. Mom, she said you look cute. I love that jacket. It's work, I said, not fashion. The president of the chamber tapped the microphone. It squealed. He grinned. Good crowd, y'all. Ready for some exciting news about River Street? Greg took the podium teeth first. He clicked a slide. Up popped a drawing of downtown with trees that don't exist and people who don't live here. The kind of drawing where no one sweats. He said words like revitalization and walkability. Then he said, "And the anchor of our Vision modern residential spaces with boutique retail, right where Coleman's Hardware currently sits. We're negotiating a very smooth transition for the owner, who will be moving to a more suitable arrangement for this stage of life." I didn't stand. I didn't shout. I didn't throw a pancake. I reached into my purse and took out the brass store key. It's heavy, the old kind, with teeth like a bite mark. I set it on the table in front of Noah gently, like you set down a baby sleeping where you need to see him breathe. He looked at it, then at me. His smile faltered. Across the room, Maya raised her hand. Greg blinked, surprised. Yes, she didn't stand either. She didn't need to. Question, she said. If the owner hasn't consented to sell, is it legal to present her property as your anchor? Greg opened his mouth, closed it, smiled in a way that asked the room to laugh with him at this adorable interruption. The room did not laugh. The room looked at me. I picked up the key and slid it back into my palm. My hand made a fist around it so tight the teeth left little moons in my skin. I didn't say a word, but I think the room heard the hinge turn anyway. Stick around, this is where the ground under their feet starts to shift. Part 2 is where the quiet becomes a plan. And hey, before you go, tell me where you're watching from in the comments. I love seeing how far a small town story can travel. You ever notice how the world doesn't stop just because your family put you on a chopping block? Bills still come. The dog still wants out at 6 a.m. The store bell still rings like it hasn't heard the word condos. I went back to Coleman's Hardware that Monday like nothing had happened. Like my son hadn't tried to sell it out from under me. Like my daughter hadn't called my jacket cute while plotting where she'd stick me when the dust settled. But I was different, quiet different, and sometimes that's the most dangerous kind. Watching their moves. The first clue came from a neighbor, Mrs. Patterson, the one who bakes banana bread when she wants information. She stopped by the store for batteries and leaned across the counter. "Rachel, honey?" I heard Noah was down at the bank with some papers. Looked real official. "You okay?" I smiled, the kind of smile you paste on so other people don't start praying over you right then and there. Of course, he's just helping. Helping. That word had started to taste bitter, like coffee left too long on the burner. That night, after locking up, I drove past the bank. There it was, Noah's car out front, the yellow sedan. His wife Lisa swore looked professional. The blinds in the manager's office were half drawn. Inside, Noah was gesturing with his hands like he was closing some deal that didn't belong to him. I sat there in the dark of my truck and thought, he doesn't even know what drawer the spare store keys are in. The drawer. When I got home, I went straight to the desk. That stubborn bottom drawer, the one you have to lift. I pulled it open. Inside was the sealed letter. Still waiting. But I wasn't ready yet. So I started smaller. Bank statements, tax filings, the old business license, and tucked between 2 expired insurance policies, something I hadn't seen in years. A photocopy of a deed, not to the store, to something else. I read the town name twice before it stuck Cedar Lake. A cabin. My husband's handwriting in the margins, his little note paid in full. Rachel's someday place. I closed my eyes, the paper trembling in my hands. He'd planned for me. Not them. The church parking lot. On Wednesday evening after Bible study, Vanessa caught me in the parking lot. Streetlight buzzing overhead, her sunglasses perched on her head like a crown. "Mom," she said, her voice dripping concern. "You know we're just trying to help, right?" I leaned on my truck door. "By selling my store." She rolled her eyes like a teenager again. "By making sure you're taken care of. You can't keep living like this. Alone. You need family." I wanted to ask her when exactly she'd decided family meant basements and supervised bingo nights. But instead, I just said, "Funny. You didn't call for 3 weeks after the funeral." Her face cracked for half a second. Then she recovered. "Grief's messy. You know that." I nodded, slid into my truck, and shut the door. She tapped the window, but I started the engine. Sometimes silence is the loudest answer. Allies appear. The next morning, Maya found me in the back office surrounded by piles of papers. "Boss," she said, balancing a coffee cup and a roll of duct tape. "You digging a grave or a gold mine?" "Maybe both," I said. She set the coffee down, glanced at the stack of deeds and statements. "Whatever they're trying, don't let them box you out. This place is yours. Everybody knows it." I studied her face. Young, fierce, loyal. Not blood, but closer to family than my own had been in months. "Would you stand with me if it came to that?" She grinned, snapped the duct tape against her palm. "Always." The seed of resistance. That night, I sat at my kitchen table with the papers spread out like a map. My husband's handwriting circled the edges of every page. Careful notes, reminders, things I had ignored because he was always the planner. Now it was me. I opened my calendar, circled Friday, the chamber breakfast fallout still fresh. Then I circled one more date, 30 days plus one. The day the letter said it was time. I wasn't ready. Not yet, but soon. I folded the deed to the Cedar Lake cabin, slid it into my purse, and whispered into the empty kitchen. They think they know the end of my story. They don't. Stick with me. Because in part 3, that letter finally opens, and when it does, the whole game changes. And while you're here, tell me something. If someone tried to take what you built, would you fight loud or quiet? Drop it in the comments. I read everyone. The letter sat on my table for 31 days. By then, the edges were soft from my fingers tracing it, but the seal was still intact. That Thursday night after the chamber breakfast fiasco, I poured myself a glass of cheap Merlot and opened it. My husband's handwriting. Careful square. His voice came alive right there in the kitchen. "Rachel, if you're reading this, you've given them the benefit of the doubt long enough. You know what they are by now. The store is yours alone. And so is the cabin at Cedar Lake. Don't let them bully you into erasing the life we built. They will try. But you, my stubborn, brilliant wife, you hold every key. When the time comes, use them." I sat there until the wine went warm, the dog asleep at my feet. He had planned for this storm. And now I finally understood he'd given me the umbrella and dared me to open it. The family meeting. On Sunday, Noah called. "We need to sit down. Vanessa and I talked. Let's settle this once and for all." They chose Applebee's. Isn't that fitting family drama served with endless fries? I walked in wearing my husband's old denim jacket, the one that still smelled faintly like motor oil. Noah already had a folder on the table, Vanessa scrolling her phone like this was just another inconvenience. "Mom," Noah said, all smooth business voice, "Greg's buyers are ready. We can close in 30 days. You'll move in with Vanessa. We'll set you up comfortable." I didn't touch the folder. Instead, I laid the letter flat between us. "This," I said, "is from your father." Vanessa looked up. Noah's smile twitched. I read it out loud. Every word. Slow, steady, letting the silence between sentences do half the work. By the end, Vanessa's nails were drumming the table. Noah's jaw was tight enough to crack. "Mom," he started. "No," I cut him off. "Your father removed your names from every deed 3 years ago? After you asked him to co-sign that restaurant loan, Noah? He didn't trust you not to gamble our life away? And he was right." The waitress came by just then, bless her timing. "Everything okay here?" I smiled at her, slid the folder of sale papers across the table. "Actually, could you throw these out for me?" She blinked, then took them without a word. Noah's face went red. "You can't just..." "I can," I said, "because it's mine. The store, the cabin, all of it. And I'm not signing away a damn thing." The mic drop. I stood up, set my tip on the table, and pulled 2 small cardboard boxes from my tote bag. I slid one to Noah, one to Vanessa. "What's this?" Vanessa asked. "Your childhoods," I said. "Ribbons, trophies, drawings, everything you thought I'd store forever. They belong to you, not me. Consider them your inheritance. Their mouths hung open. People at the next booth turned to watch. I didn't care. I looked at my son, who was still clutching the empty spot where his sale papers had been. You thought grief made me weak, but all it did was strip away the patience I had for your lies. Then I turned to my daughter's sunglasses perched on her head like armor. You wanted me in your basement. You forgot I own the foundation under your feet. And then I walked out, past the salad bar, past the hostess stand, past the curious stares. Outside, the night air was sharp like it wanted me awake. Aftermath. By the time I got home, my phone was buzzing, voicemails stacking. Mom, you embarrassed us. You can't just spring things like that. You'll regret this. But all I felt was light. Light for the first time since the funeral. I set the letter back in the drawer, laid the cabin deed beside it, and whispered into the quiet house. They don't own me. Not anymore. Stick around, because in part 4 we see the fallout. Reputations crumble, bridges burn, and Rachel finally begins building something new on her own terms. And before you go, tell me in the comments, if you had one letter from someone you loved, what would you hope it said? The morning after Applebee's, the phone started before sunrise. First Noah, then Vanessa, then Lisa, my daughter-in-law. With that voice she uses when she's pretending to care, Rachel, we're all just worried about you. Worried. That word again. It didn't sound like concern. It sounded like panic that their plan had slipped through my fingers. I didn't answer. I let the machine do the talking. And when I finally checked the voicemails, I sat on the edge of my bed, listening like it was some kind of play I hadn't auditioned for. Mom, the buyers are furious. You embarrassed us. You can't just walk out like that. We had a deal. Rachel, you're not thinking straight. This isn't you, but it was me. For the first time in years, it was me. Cracks in the mask. By Tuesday, the whispers had reached the town. I caught them in the grocery store aisles in the diner booths. Did you hear Noah Coleman tried to sell his mama's store without asking her? Vanessa wanted her in a basement. Can you believe that? Small towns don't forget. And they don't forgive people who look like they're trying to cut the heart out of the place. Greg Talbot, the slick realtor, showed up at the hardware store mid-afternoon looking like a man who'd swallowed a lemon. Rachel, we had a professional arrangement, he said. No, Greg. You had a fantasy, I told him. And fantasies don't pay commission. He left without buying so much as a washer. The cabin. That weekend, I drove to Cedar Lake. Alone. The road wound through pines that smelled like every summer I thought we'd get to have. The cabin was smaller than I'd pictured, white paint peeling a little porch sagging in the middle. But when I unlocked the door and stepped inside, it felt like breathing after holding your breath too long. The kitchen was simple wood cabinets, enamel sink sunlight spilling across a scarred pine table. The kind of place where coffee tastes better because the silence holds it. I walked out back, and there it was, the lake, still, wide, mirroring the sky. My husband had chosen well. He always did. I sat on the porch steps, deed in my lap, and thought, this is mine, not theirs. Mine. An unexpected ally. A car pulled up later that afternoon. Old Ford truck, blue paint, faded. Out stepped Maya, holding a grocery bag. I figured you'd forget food, she said, handing me bread, cheese, a jar of jam. You drove an hour out here, I asked. She shrugged. Figured you shouldn't unpack alone. So we did it together. Carried in boxes, swept the porch, hung a curtain that had been stuffed in a closet. She stayed until the sun dropped low and the lake turned the color of coins. Before she left, she said, Rachel, they might be your blood, but you get to choose your family. Don't forget that. I didn't answer. I didn't need to. Fallout. Back in town, Noah's real estate reputation was cracking. People whispered about the Applebee's scene, about him counting money before it existed. Vanessa stopped coming to church. couldn't stand the stares the way the choir director avoided her like she was contagious. And me, I showed up every morning, unlocked the hardware store, rang the bell, and smiled when the regulars came in. Because the best revenge isn't loud. It's steady. It's staying when everyone bet you'd fall. A new beginning. At the cabin, I started writing. Not the novel my husband used to joke about, but something simpler. A memoir. Notes about marriage, motherhood, the slow way love can turn into duty if you're not careful. Words I wished someone had told me at 30. Every page felt like a nail hammered into something sturdy. Something no one could pry loose. I wasn't rebuilding for them. I was rebuilding for me. I'll tell you, there's a special kind of peace in realizing the worst already happened and you're still here. Stick around, because in part 5 we'll close the circle. Rachel passes on a legacy, not money, not property, but something no one can steal, the lesson that your worth belongs to you. And before you go, tell me this. If you had a cabin by a lake, would you keep it quiet like a secret? Or invite the whole family over? The lake has a way of teaching you patience. In the mornings, it's silver, flat as glass, so still you can see every cloud stitched into the sky. By afternoon, it's restless, choppy, sparkling like it can't make up its mind. And by nightfall, it's black and endless, holding onto the stars like secrets. I'd been living at Cedar Lake for 3 months when Lily came. My granddaughter, 20 years old, and she looked more like the child I used to rock to sleep than the young woman her mother bragged about on Facebook. I knew she was coming. She'd called from her dorm in a rush of words, voice shaking with something that wasn't quite anger and wasn't quite grief. Grandma, I need to see you. I don't care what Mom says. I need to hear the truth from you. I told her to come. No hesitation. And when she stepped off the bus that afternoon with her oversized duffel bag, I realized I'd been holding my breath for months. The arrival. Grandma! She shouted across the gravel lot like she was 6 again and racing me up the porch steps. I opened my arms. She dropped the duffel right there in the dust and ran into me. Her hug was desperate, bone-cracking, like she was afraid I'd vanish if she didn't hold tight. I whispered into her hair, I'm not going anywhere. And for the first time in a long time, I felt like someone believed me. We drove back to the cabin with the windows rolled down. She stuck her arm out, let the wind whip her sleeve, just like her grandfather used to do. He always said the wind was the cheapest therapy money couldn't buy. When we turned down the dirt road that led to the lake, Lily pressed her face to the window. This is yours, she asked, voice half awe, half disbelief. Ours, I corrected. Porch confessions. That night, we sat on the porch wrapped in old quilts, the lake stretched out before us. The air smelled like pine and damp earth. Crickets filled the silence. She didn't wait long before the questions came. Mom said you had a breakdown, that you disappeared, that you embarrassed the family. I laughed low, bitter, the kind of laugh that comes from a wound that's healed crooked. If by breakdown she means I stopped handing out pieces of myself to people who only knew how to take, then sure. I broke down. Her eyes softened. I didn't think so. I knew there had to be more to it. There's always more, I said. For the next hour, I told her stories she'd never heard. About her grandfather's quiet stubbornness. About the night we almost lost the store in the recession and how we pulled through by selling off my jewelry. About the way he'd circle words in the newspaper grants programs, opportunities, and remind me that a life could always be rebuilt if you were willing to learn. And then I told her the truth about her mother and uncle, how they'd tried to sell the store, how they'd arranged meetings behind my back, how they'd decided the basement of Vanessa's house was a good solution. By the end, Lily's hands were fists inside the quilt. I can't believe them. You can? I said gently. You just don't want to. The key. On her 3rd day, I took her into town. We walked the aisles of the hardware store together. Mr. Alvarez waved, Miss Carroll complained about birdseed prices, same as always. But Lily looked around like she was in a cathedral. touching the paint swatches, running her fingers over the counters, ringing the service bell 3 times just to hear it sound. "This place smells like Grandpa," she said softly. I reached into my pocket, pulled out the brass key. Heavy, worn smooth by decades of use. I pressed it into her palm. Her eyes widened. "What is this?" "It's the store key. But it's more than that." She looked confused. "Listen to me," I said. "This key isn't about bolts and shelves. It's about dignity. It's about remembering that no one gets to tell you what you're worth. When you hold this, you remember you are more than what people take from you." Her lips trembled. Tears fell fast. She closed her fist around the key like it was gold. "I won't forget Grandma. I promise." And in that moment, I knew my story wasn't ending. It was being handed forward, breaking the cycle. Over the next week, Lily and I settled into a rhythm. Mornings, coffee on the porch, lake fog, curling like breath. Afternoons, drives into town, long walks through the pines, sometimes just sitting in the cabin while I wrote in my journal and she sketched in hers. Evenings, laughter, real laughter, the kind that shakes loose the dust inside your chest. One night, she asked Grandma, "What do you want for the rest of your life?" I thought about it, about everything I'd lost and everything I still had. Then I said, "Peace, that's all. Peace, and the knowledge that when I'm gone, people remember me as mine. Not as theirs to manage or use or bury under obligations. Just mine." She leaned her head on my shoulder. "You already are." And I believed her. The children's fallout. Back in town, Noah's real estate deals dried up. Word spread fast. People don't trust a man who'll sell his mother's legacy for quick cash. Vanessa stopped coming to church altogether. Couldn't handle the stares. Couldn't bear the whispers that followed her down the grocery aisle. But me, I kept showing up. I opened the store every morning, rang the bell, sold the nails and screws and birdseed. Because revenge doesn't always look like fireworks. Sometimes it looks like staying steady when everyone swore you'd fall apart. The lesson. That last night before Lily returned to school, we sat on the dock. The stars overhead were so bright, it felt like the universe was listening. She turned to me. "Grandma, I need to tell you something. You're the strongest person I know. And I don't want to make the same mistakes Mom and Uncle Noah made. I don't want to take you for granted." I smiled at her. "Then don't. It's really that simple." She nodded, gripping the key in her pocket. "I'll remember." And I believe she will. Closing reflection. Here's what I know now. Sometimes revenge isn't loud. Sometimes it's not about tearing someone else down. Sometimes it's just about standing tall when the world expects you to crawl. My children thought they could box me into a basement. Instead, I found a cabin by a lake. They thought I'd sign away my life. Instead, I signed my name to peace. And the brass key, it isn't mine anymore. It belongs to Lily, to the next generation, to anyone who needs to be reminded that dignity is not negotiable. Love without respect isn't love. And dignity, that's the one inheritance no one can steal. So that's how my story ends. Not with shouting, not with slammed doors, but with a lake, a porch, a granddaughter, and a key. And maybe that's enough. Stay with me, because there are more stories like this of people underestimated, cornered, written off. And if you've ever been told you were less than I want you to remember, you hold your own key. And before you go, tell me this in the comments. If you could hand one object to the next generation, something that carried your whole story, what would it be?